Hey everyone, welcome back. Ready to dive into something pretty crucial today. Media representation. And I know they can sound like, well, a bit of a buzzword.
Right, right.
But trust me, this isn't just about like ticking boxes.
No, not at all.
It's about understanding how we see ourselves, how we see others, and honestly, it's all tied to what we see on screens.
Hmm.
Magazines, video games, you name it.
It's everywhere. And the thing is, media, it doesn't just reflect our world back at us. You know, it really shapes it.
Whoa. Okay, hold on. How so?
It influences perceptions,
Oh, okay.
biases,
Uh-huh.
even down to, think about it, like how we vote.
So we're talking like early Hollywood, those crazy stereotypes,
Oh,
to
absolutely.
like how TikTok is changing things up today.
100%. Think about those old movies where like entire cultures were like turned into these weird caricatures, right?
Yeah.
Now people, they're using social media to call that out.
Right, right,
It's
right.
like, nope, that's not us.
Yeah, demanding more.
Yeah, authenticity.
It's like finally there's a voice at the table.
It really is.
But okay, how do we even start unpacking this? What even is good representation? Like how do we know it when we see it?
That's the question, isn't it? I think good representation, it's about reflecting the real diversity of the world.
Okay, yeah,
But it has to be accurate.
right.
And it has to actually give agency to the people who've been, pushed aside, marginalized.
So not just like a diverse cast, but their stories have to like feel real.
Yes,
And they actually affect the plot, the story.
exactly. It's the difference between, say, a movie with that one token minority character
Yeah.
who's
Yeah.
basically just there to help the white main character, right?
Right.
Versus a story where that character's experiences, their struggles, like that's the heart of the story.
I'm starting to see the layers here. It's not just whom on screen, but it's also how their story is being told.
Yes, exactly. And that's where the source material gets really, really interesting.
Okay.
It talks about how, historically, if a group is underrepresented or misrepresented, it fuels stereotypes.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
And that even has an impact on things like policies.
Wow. So this isn't just about like entertainment.
Yeah.
This is like real world stuff.
Absolutely. I mean, think about how, for like decades, certain groups, right, they were only ever portrayed as criminals
Right, right, right.
or sidekicks or victims.
It's crazy.
And that really shaped public perception, which, leads to bias and discrimination.
That's heavy. But the source material, it also talked about how things are changing, right?
It does.
I mean, we went from those limited roles to, well, Black Panther. That felt different.
Black Panther was huge. It wasn't just a superhero movie. It challenged how Hollywood depicted Africa.
Right.
I mean, it introduced this whole concept of Afrofuturism to a global audience.
Yeah, it blew up.
And it proved that stories celebrating Black culture, they could be critically acclaimed
Mm-hmm.
and box office hits.
And that's what I loved about it. You know, it wasn't just checking a box. It felt like a real celebration.
It did.
But the expert in the source material, they point out that while there's been progress, we're not, like, done, right? We're not quite there yet.
We're not. The data shows, certain groups, people of color, women, people with disabilities, the LGBTQ plus community, they're still underrepresented,
Yeah.
often stuck in those stereotypical roles.
It feels like, what, 2 steps phone, 1 step back?
Yeah, sometimes. And the source material, it actually quotes a filmmaker who says, the industry's changing,
Okay.
but we need more diverse voices behind the scenes.
Oh, interesting.
Writers, directors, producers, to make sure the storytelling is authentic.
Yeah, that makes sense. If the people telling the stories are from those groups, they're going to bring something you can't fake.
Exactly.
Authenticity.
It's about who has the power to shape narratives, whose stories get told, and whose get left out.
And I'm curious, like, what changes have you personally seen in media over the years? Have you seen this shift toward, like, more authentic representation?
I have. I really have. Especially like just in the last few years,
Yeah.
there are more shows with more diverse casts, and the storylines are tackling more complex, like social issues. But the quality of that representation, it can be a little iffy sometimes.
Yeah, I get you. Just because you have diversity, that doesn't automatically mean it's, like, good representation, right?
Exactly.
Sometimes it feels like, I don't know, checking boxes.
And that's where this idea of tokenism comes in, which the source material really, it digs into it. It's like those, 80s action movies.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
With that one woman who's basically just there to be rescued.
Right, right.
She has no depth,
Yeah.
no real impact on the story.
Or that one character from a minority group who, like, They get a few lines,
Right.
but ultimately it's just to make the white lead look, like, accepting.
Exactly. It's creating this illusion of diversity,
Right.
but it's actually reinforcing the power imbalances. And the source material, it really argues that authentic representation, it goes way beyond just visibility,
It's about more than just being seen.
It's about portraying characters from marginalized groups in a way that's complex and nuanced.
Okay.
It's about giving them agency, letting their stories drive the narrative.
It's not just like them being there. It's about their experiences actually like mattering.
Exactly. It's the difference between the show that, like, casts a disabled actor,
Okay.
but never even mentions their disability,
Yeah.
versus a show that really explores how that character navigates a world that wasn't really built for them.
That makes me think about how much of the media we consume, it's still centered around this like very specific type of protagonist, right?
Yeah.
It's like white, straight, able-bodied. It's almost like those stories are the universal ones
Yeah.
and everything else is like niche.
Yeah, and that reflects a bigger problem in society, doesn't it? It's about whose stories are considered worthy of telling.
Yeah.
Whose experiences do people think will connect with a wider audience?
Yeah.
The source material argues that to really make a difference, to make things more equitable, we need to diversify the types of stories we're telling.
So it's not just about changing the faces on screen, it's challenging those assumptions about like whose story is even worth telling in the first place.
Exactly. And that's where the audience, we come in.
Okay, yeah.
It's not enough to just passively consume stuff.
Right.
The source material, it talks about how important critical media literacy is.
So like not just watching a show, but actually like thinking about what it's saying.
Yeah. Ask yourself, who are the creators?
Okay.
Whose perspectives are at the center?
Right.
Are stereotypes being, used, or are they being challenged?
Mm-hmm.
How does this show or this movie or this video game, how does it contribute to the bigger conversation about representation?
Wow. I realize like I rarely watch stuff with that level of like intention.
It's a skill, though,
Yeah.
Takes a little practice, but it's really empowering when you get there. Because if you start paying attention to those choices creators are making, you become a more informed consumer.
Mm-hmm.
You can support the content that actually aligns with your values.
Yeah.
And you start to see those little subtle biases that kind of fly into the radar a lot of the time.
That's really cool. So it's not about feeling bad about liking certain shows.
No.
It's about being aware of what we're watching and why. So how do we become more critical viewers? Like, where do we even start?
You can start small. Pick one show that you're watching right now and really pay attention.
Okay.
Are there any characters from marginalized groups? How are they being portrayed?
Yeah.
Are their stories given the same weight, the same complexity as the main characters?
That's doable. It's like a little media analysis project.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And don't be afraid to talk about what you notice, with friends or online.
Yeah.
The more we have these conversations, the more normal it becomes to critically engage with media.
I feel like sometimes people get really defensive when you talk about representation.
Oh, I know.
It's like they take it as a personal attack if you point out something that's like problematic in a show they like.
It's understandable. But the thing is, it's not about judging people or their tastes.
Okay.
It's about having a bigger conversation about how media shapes our understanding of the world. Those conversations can be tough,
Yeah.
but they're necessary to move forward.
It's about being open to learning and like questioning our own assumptions. And speaking of assumptions, one thing I wanted to dig into a little more is this concept of intersectionality. The source material touches on it. Can you like unpack that a bit more for us?
Of course, intersectionality, it's basically recognizing that we all have multiple identities, right?
Right.
Race, gender, sexuality, class, ability, and they all like intersect. They influence each other.
Yeah.
So like a black woman, she experiences the world differently than a white woman,
Mm-hmm.
differently than a black man because of the combination of her race and her gender.
It's understanding that people don't fit into neat little boxes.
Exactly. And that's super important for authentic representation. It's not enough to just have like a little bit of diversity in each category.
Right.
We need to see those intersections on screen.
Okay.
We need stories that explore how those different parts of a person's identity shape their lives and their experiences.
That makes me think of like the movie Crazy Rich Asians. It wasn't just about an Asian American woman finding love.
Right.
It was about class, culture, family dynamics within that specific community.
Yes. It showed how complex and how diverse the Asian American experience really is. It moved beyond those like surface level stereotypes. That's the power of intersectional representation.
It's like layering all these different threads in the tapestry. You get a much richer, more like nuanced picture.
And it makes the storytelling way more compelling.
Yeah.
We get to see characters dealing with real issues in a way that feels genuine, that feels relatable, even if their experiences are different from ours.
This whole conversation has been so eye-opening, honestly. I'm already thinking about the media I watch differently.
That's amazing. The first step toward change is awareness.
Yeah.
And remember, this isn't about being some perfect media consumer
Right.
or feeling guilty for enjoying certain shows. It's about engaging more critically
Yeah.
and using your voice to demand better.
We've covered so much. I'm really excited to move into something a bit more concrete.
Okay.
I'd love to hear about some specific shows or films that you think are getting representation right.
Oh, there are so many. They're proving that inclusive storytelling can be entertaining and impactful.
Hit me with some of those good examples. What are some shows that come to mind, like that are getting it right? What can we learn from them?
One that jumps out right away is Reservation Dogs
Oh, yeah, I've heard about this one.
on FX.
Okay.
It's this comedy drama about four indigenous teenagers growing up on a reservation in Oklahoma.
Cool.
And what makes it so special is that it was created by indigenous writers and directors.
Oh,
And
wow.
you can just tell it's so authentic.
I've heard amazing things about it, yeah. It's not shying away from, like, the real struggles facing Native communities, is it?
No, not at all. It tackles things like poverty, substance abuse, the legacy of colonialism,
Wow.
but it does it with humor and heart and just this deep respect for indigenous culture and traditions.
Yeah,
And the characters, they're not just defined by their struggles.
right.
They're funny, they're complex, they're full of life.
It sounds like it's really, like, challenging those stereotypical portrayals of indigenous people that we've seen for so long.
100%. It's reclaiming the narrative. It's saying, no, this is what it's actually like.
Yeah, yeah.
And it's a perfect example of why having diversity behind the scenes is so important.
Okay, so authentic storytelling, diverse creators. What else should we be looking for when we're talking about good representation?
Intersectionality. Remember we talked about that.
Right, right.
One show that does this brilliantly is Pose.
Oh, on FX.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's set in like the 80s New York ballroom scene.
Okay.
And it's all about the lives of Black and Latinx transgender women.
I love that show. The costumes, the music, the performances were amazing.
Right.
But what really hit me was how the show like celebrated the joy and resilience of the LGBTQ plus community,
Yeah.
even when they were going through tough times.
It doesn't shy away from like the discrimination, the violence, the stigma that those characters face,
Yeah.
but it also celebrates their strength, their love, their community.
Yeah.
It shows their humanity.
And it did it in a way that felt, I don't know, celebratory and educational at the same time.
Yeah, I get you.
It brought a subculture that a lot of people didn't know about
Mm-hmm.
into the mainstream.
Exactly. And that's the power of entertainment,
Yeah.
It could be a tool for raising awareness, for promoting understanding. Pose. It introduced people to this whole world they might never have seen.
Yeah.
And it did it with empathy, respect, and a lot of style.
It's pretty cool how a show can entertain you, but also, like, help you understand the world better, Understand the people in it better.
That's exactly why representation matters. When we see ourselves, when we see others reflected in this authentic, nuanced way,
Mm-hmm.
it challenges our assumptions. It helps us be more empathetic. And ultimately, it creates a society that's more inclusive and just.
This whole conversation has been so inspiring. Honestly, I'm already thinking about media differently.
That's awesome.
Like, I have a whole new set of criteria for, like, judging what I watch, what I read, what I play.
I love that.
I'm going to pay more attention to, like, who's making it, how the story's told, whose voices are being heard.
That's the spirit. And remember, this is a journey.
Yeah.
Always more to learn, always more to explore, always more to talk about.
It's about being curious, right? Asking questions and having those conversations, even if they're a little uncomfortable.
100%. It's about being an active participant in shaping a media landscape that actually reflects the real world.
I love that. Well, thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive into the world of media representation. Hopefully, it sparked some new ideas for y'all listening, challenged some of your assumptions, and maybe even inspired you to check out some new shows, new films that really celebrate the power of inclusive storytelling.
Yeah. Keep those conversations going. Talk to your friends, your family, your coworkers about what you learned. Share what you loved. Call out the stuff that needs work.
Because we can create a media landscape that's better, more representative, more human. We can do it together. Thanks for listening, everyone.